Our first reader tonight is Ed Lahey. Ed was born in Butte, and he grew up in Butte. His father worked in the mines. I asked Ed what else he would like me to tell you all about him, and what everyone loves about Ed was revealed in his answer, which was, oh, I want to thank my teachers. I want to remember my teachers and tell them who my teachers were. And so Ed said that he remembers the significant teachers in his life were Leslie Fiedler, from whom he took classes in poetry appreciation, and Richard Hugo, whose workshops he participated in while he worked on an MA in literature at the University of Montana. And then he said, I have a number of teachers still that I work with and think along with, Rick DeMarinis, Dexter Roberts, and some who are still teaching, some who have retired, and teachers at Carroll College and at Montana Tech, where Ed Lahey also taught, and Ed also taught at the University of Montana. Ed published Blind Horses in 1979, which was the first of the first annual First Book Awards, and he said it is at the Library of Congress if you'd like to find it. He had a short story recently published in Shite Poke, which was quarterly put out in Alaska. He's working on a novel and has finished a novel and is working on a second one. I wanted to tell a personal story about Ed. I asked him, can I tell this story, because this was such a wonderful moment. In 1984, which was, of course, the pivotal year when everything was supposed to be clear that our world was a disaster, and of course that year Ronald Reagan was reelected, 3 friends of mine and I drove over to Butte to visit another woman friend who was working on a book about Butte to spend the day and sort of, I don't know, cluster round, as the Victorians would say, to keep the world from falling apart. And in the middle of the we went out for lunch. In the middle of the afternoon, it was about 2 in the afternoon. We went to the Silver Dollar Bar, and no one was there, and we had a Coke, and the barmaid there was playing on the tape deck Country Joe McDonald. So we said, Teresa, do you know Ed Lahey? We'd all read Blind Horses, his book, and we loved this book. And she said, yes, I do know Ed. And we said, would you go call him up and ask him if he'd come down to the Silver Dollar Bar, that there are 5 beautiful women here who would love to hear him read to them, and no one else is here. And she said, sure, I'll go try. So she called him up, and sure enough, he came down in 10 minutes, and he sat and read Blind Horses to us. So that's the way we all celebrated 1984, and it's not such a bad world. Anyway, I'd like to introduce you to Ed Lahey.
That's pretty much the way she got me tonight, too. She called me up and she said, would you come down to Missoula and read? I was thinking that would be fun because I haven't seen Vic for many years. Bette wanted me to read out of that book, which they liked in 1984. I still like it. It's been with me pretty near all my life. But I want to read some new poetry tonight and a little fiction, maybe. I called this sometimes one thing and then sometimes another. Sometimes we tend to chase each other up the trees we swing from, trees as fine as weeping willows, fir and larch and pine. But it's not monkey business, she hangs on like skin. I don't have to make her up. Begin and begin again. The condition we've always been in. She's brave. She appears or tries to do so when I need her, but I am, surprise, growing older, and know that I need other things too. Silly putty, music, fine language, friends. I will carry on and climb carefully from the soil, cultivated and kind. She may take her time, like a vine, will suit me just fine, and keep me in a poetic frame of mind and sensitive prose and money and clothes and a heart in tune with her thoughtful soul's intuition and toes in the deepest of ways and conditions of the dream. So it is with us, a possibility. Old warriors, together again. There is so much truth in Retke's line and question, what is desire? The impulse to make someone else complete? That woman would set sodden straw on fire. Still, the deepest reason for being responsible is probably mysterious, and between such intimates, religiously sexual and clear, honorable and warming, comfortable and wise. I was up at Flathead Lake some years back with a friend of mine who came down here tonight. And I was tickled to see him because I was hoping that he would come since my wife has caught a ride with him to go back to Butte. And more than that, I'm glad to see him because we're old friends. And I wrote this poem and dedicated it to him. And like the first poem, I've never made up my mind what to call it. One thing Dick Hugo always used to insist upon is that we have titles for the poems that we wrote. And he insisted with such a lot of insistence that it made me self-conscious about titles, and I'm apt to call my poems Poem 1, Poem 2, Poem 3, Poem 4, Poem 5. But he knew about that too. I'll call this poem Birds of a Feather. Wind-blown waves break pearl white over your gray hair at Flathead Lake. Beneath the chilly sun at the bay, the ducks claim where the dog with the hurt eyes, the barman hates, fights the rope tied to the cold shore of the whipping lake. North and later, Essex, salmon under Apgar Bridge feed themselves as fated sacrifice to eagles down from the mountains. Keen and grateful talons, a roily feast, free of unrequited love, untouched by neglect. Webs of sentiment, the kokanee at least, are free. I recall for no reason her laughter in bed, whiskey cakes, the grave intimacy of a thigh, insistent as a rolling salmon, the scales and feathers of a love affair, 24 saxophones, a skein of geese nattering overhead, a ticker tape of gray, the Essex railhead, a locomotive purrs, whispers. Downstairs the boy barman longs for the bright lights of Big Sandy, combs his hair, ignores the birds nesting in the tamarack 1,000 yards away. Memento mori. Mindful of the final cycle, I watched the eagles reel in the mirror, west of the Shy Fellows, east of the Blue Missions, where gold and silver has small say, as we slip through silky forest green now, down the black new highway, home, the daylight dawning. Years later at the Fox Hotel, I will die on somebody's birthday. It is always that way with us, striving to become a minor poet or to get over being one, writing a clear letter to someone in Canada. May it be you, probably in February, warm in my coat. A rose from a stranger I know I could love, a cup of coffee with ice cream, a dollop floating rich as my life, North Star French vanilla, cooling in the mug you threw by the read and unread letter on pink paper, dear Ed. You qualify for the job, our janitor is dead. We know you could fill his shoes. The work is not too hard. We were impressed with your experience on the university's labor maintenance gang, and the super likes your poetry. He did not know what you meant when you wrote you believed in the mysticism of the Union, the Book of Changes. But the job is still open and pays $1,100 a month, and Gracie said she could, if you can't, get you in Local 306, if you get my meaning. But you must join. Hope you are feeling better. A heart attack is no fun. Your friend and fan, K. Prose. P.S. Keep writing. We love your verses. Sorry you did not win the World Poetry Contest. You deserve it, if anybody does. Nobody does. I wrote this poem to honor a relationship with a friend that goes back before Dick Hugo's rather remarkable workshops, before I met Vic Charlo, before I thought about taxation and Indians. But it was also time when I was thinking about the same kind of things that I think we think about yet. And I think it's the same kind of thing that anybody who's really interested in poetry thinks about. But I've dedicated it to an old friend who I wrote it about back in 1964. This is a very old poem for me, because I'm, getting a little older myself. I had a little trailer house, not much of a trailer house. And he had left the university. His name was John Schwartz. He's retiring this year, I understand. He's a full professor down at Fullerton College in West LA. He came up here last summer, and I met him downtown, and we spent the day together and had a good time. And he remembered this poem, and he sent me a short story. He published a little novel called Oh You Wretch, Harry Miles. So I wrote back and I said, keep writing, you wretch. Which was the theme of his novel, and it's kind of, why we write, I guess. Anyway, I wouldn't have written this if it hadn't been for Dick Hugo's class and for the people I associated with in the class and for the experience with those people who wanted to learn how to write better and who wanted to be recognized as writers and who wanted to think that they could learn to be better people, maybe. Also better writers. So I wrote this back in 1964, but I wrote it about an experience I had down here at the university when I was an undergraduate, and I was looking up to an older friend who was an upperclassman. He was a graduate student, and he's now, as I say, retiring as a full professor from the Fullerton College. I still have that same relationship with John Schwartz in a way. I'm sitting in a trailer listening to the nerve of a chainsaw cut 10 years from the image of a man, worrying a loose key in my K-Pro, a tooth that bothers the tongue in my hand, a twitch in my jaw. When I wrote that poem originally, I did not say K-Pro, I said Underwood. It was a typewriter. A ripe Macintosh just fell off the roof from a tree that sheds deliciously, a pleasing sound, but it bothers me that I don't know you anymore, dark inside the shut core of that apple, rolling red on ground outside the door. Remember the decorated ukulele that fell from the Buckhouse Bridge we walked together? Or did you drop it in the river to hear the splash of Baroque art? Or see fancy carved wood disappear forever? Do you still wear a beard or some other signal of defiance? What can I say in a letter to someone who is editing Henry Miller? Your ghost comes from years, a curious skip of TV from afar, a sign that you aren't lost in space. Herringbone on the face of the image makes me fear the picture I seek on paper. Years harden us like scars. I could phone, but what if the wires were dead when I went to call? Or when I reached you, I found myself alone on the line. What if you said, hello, in a voice I didn't know at all? And I could hear the tree strain in the wind and that apple already sprayed white with frost fall in a ring of moist red bells to claim the well-kept grass, and that was all. Well, I did come from Butte, you know, and I've been thinking about Butte most of my life in one way or another because I came from there, and because I've lived there on and off over the years. Come in. I wrote this poem because I got in on a conversation one time with some people who realized that Butte was kind of dying and coming back to life all at the same time. You know, this is a condition. It's kind of some kind of a condition of dying and coming back to life at the same time. And in this conversation, it was no cocktail party. But in this conversation, I overheard a bright woman who I did not know say, "Better Butte Nouveau than no Butte at all." So I wrote this poem and I called it Butte Nouveau. They take vitamins, read poetry, watch the night stars through telescopes, listen to jazz, do yoga, knowing through epiphany they could have seen Shakespeare in the round. I think of the greenish blue mud on Howard's boots and the copper sores on Norman's leg, plugged sewers, the chill of the 3800, the sound of the cage, slick skids, the graveyard, day, night, part of my karma. Still, I do not want to see the Pope, nor do I think I am in touch with the lives I may have lived as a copper king. No theater more dramatic than my father's lamp and helmet hanging in the tool shed. Do I have to read some fiction? Maybe I ought to read a little fiction. Time here. I did kind of enjoy writing this. This is what happens to people who grow up in Montana sometimes. In a sense, we get caught up in spiritual autobiography because there's so few of us here after all. This is a little story called Bruno. I have never been normal, but in recent years I have wanted to move in that direction. I have gone to priests, Jungian diplomats, ministers, professors, psychiatrists, to see if somehow I could get a hold on the elusive beam which keeps men straight and happy. I have not found out a great deal, though I must admit that I might have learned more from these well-intentioned folks if I had not been worried about Bruno. You see, Bruno is my bear. He lives with me. And he has lived with me since he was a helter-skelter cub. So this is a kind of confession, personal, and coming from the inside of the space where I live with a cranky and often incorrigible bear. And since it is impossible to keep Bruno out of the sight of ordinary people who pull their pants on one leg at a time, I have decided to drop my mask and pride and admit my relationship with my bear dominates my soul. He is with me all of the time, and he goes along even into the most private human places. It takes energy to avoid avidya, or spiritual ignorance, when you are tending to such a relationship. And I believe that I work harder than most in order to stand free of maya, the spinning capacity of the psyche, which wraps us in a cocoon of self-deception. How difficult it is to maintain the pragmatic sense of reality you will discover upon hearing about my roommate. And then you can pass judgment on whether or not you think I have a real problem or am merely wrestling with the projections of the magic lantern within that casts its shadow on the screen of life. Sometimes, though not often, I am glad Bruno was with me, glad we lived together, simply because I know him so well, and because he has been with me a long, long time. That's just a little 2 pages of that short story. It appeared in the magazine that Bette mentioned, or the journal that Bette mentioned. The journal was called Shite Poke. And it was a fine little journal, and they featured that story, and it's a novella now, but it's still not finished. But I'm still living with Bruno, you know. I make notes. This one says, very hard to read a complete story. Earl Gans said that when he read in Butte not too long ago. I said, boy, that's an important thing to remember. But he read the whole story, and I enjoyed it enormously, too, the story he read. But I can't hardly manage that tonight, but I will read you a little bit of a story which I'm working on, and that it's related to my Bruno story, but it's a little different. I called it Underground. Underground again with Crazy Dan, the buzzy wrecker, hands hooked up to a widow maker. That's a line out of a poem I wrote a long time ago. I kept flashing on an underground memory, a company shift boss examining the diamond drill cores my partner and I pulled from a setup in the Kelly shaft, looking for the telltale signs of mineral. Schizophrenia laced with definite ingrained traits of paranoia, Van Smattering said in the pre-release interview, his frown the concentrated look of a chemist swirling the polluted contents of a murky retort, complicated by abnormal initiative, he added, clearly displeased with me, Merc, and God. I tried to steady my foot to keep it from tapping methodically, the tremor a side effect of the tranquilizer, along with a tinny taste of alum, which formed as tiny white flecks in the corners of my mouth, making me look like I munched continuously on Rolaids. Will I get okay? Better? Better, he asked, as though the question was egregious. Health, especially mental health, is very relative, as are all conditions of health. As a matter of fact, I have to take cortisone shots in my foot, for instance, he went on, lifting his leg and wagging his polished wingtips as though showing off his shoes. He'd caught his toes in a power lawnmower during the summer and had suffered an ugly, long-lasting reaction. Probably half shot and in short pants, an inmate on C ward had snickered. You could tell as he looked at his foot it was an unpleasant memory, maybe even frightening, because he smiled again. He smiled often, but sadly, his acceptance of suffering the price he paid for deep understanding. He looked a final time at his wagging shoe, then swiveled his desk chair and peered lazily out of the window into the cloudy gloom of the wintry day, the mist rising wispily over the duck ponds of the grounds below his office. Thinking wise thoughts, I supposed, though maybe merely daydreaming or yearning for spring and warmer sun that would burn away the fog. I waited politely to hear what he might say, embarrassed that my foot tapped the floor uncontrollably, as though telegraphing messages to the grim zombies who trudged along the lime green corridors in the cracker box of a state building, the chain gang moving 2 by 2 down the long ghostly cinder block tunnels. He turned suddenly, then looked sharply into my face like a cat who had heard the sound of a mouse under a sofa, causing me to recross my legs nervously, to change the position of my stuttering foot, to wince inadvertently. I kept my eyes steady, however, knowing that shifty eye movements were indicative of paranoia. Ingrained paranoia that showed no matter what, like ring around the collar. You were intensely psychotic when you entered the hospital, he said. Quite psychotic, he muttered grimly into the pile of papers on his desk. I think I needed vitamin C, I said. You are in need of much more than that. He laughed harshly, not in the least amused, his mouth open like a man about to bite. I remembered the confusion of gowns and nurses and thought he was probably right. But I didn't smile. Only shreds of realism left, but a dim intuition of savagery lurking in his tone of voice held me in check, as did the paranoid memories of other tough spots along the trail. He looked at me as one might look at a disposable razor after the 31st shave. He made me feel a little bit like what he had in mind was on the order of a crematorium in Hitler's Germany, or a tired regret that crazies weren't just burned at the stake, or at least given some kind of a blackball, the end of a man's wrestling card, or of his working life. Psychotic, I blurted. Somebody thump went my foot. Psychotic, he said, his mouth as tight as a gambler, showing only the slight trace of insincerity born of the knowledge that he was playing with a stacked deck. Marked cards, Socratic, calm, waiting for me to raise the ante or pass. His feline eyebrows arched, his expression suddenly that of a barman holding a bottle of choice whiskey in front of a man who hadn't had a drink in months. Psychotic, he said. I think I need a drink, actually. He looked at me curiously, And I looked back at him. Well, that's true, isn't it? I allowed, smiling somewhat sadly myself, drinking at his words, the inescapable fountain of choice conclusions, benign and reasonable. He held the cards and the keys, and he reminded me again of the shift boss, ruthless, anarchical, empowered by the state in his credential this time, instead of simply in the employment of the anaconda. He smiled once more, broadly, 2 gold fillings reflecting light in his mouth, laser blips in the back of a video game. He scooted his chair into his desk impatiently and sighed as he picked up his pen to fill in the forms the computer had supplied, a signal that I had passed the test, would most assuredly be released at the end of the 90-day term. Unless, he added, unforeseen psychotic formations reoccur. I do not think that will happen as long as you take your meds. Not my meds, I thought, remembering the orderly who made me take them, handing me the orange juice and the pills, a concerned but condescending expression accompanying the watch. The medication is at its optimum. The effect is satisfactory. It is not a cure, I am sorry to say, merely a palliative. But I advise you to treat your prescription as a diabetic would treat insulin, something you must get used to taking for the rest of your life. The rest of my life? I mean, the rest of my life, I asked, my foot hammering away. Hell's bells, man, he said, fed up with my whimpering. Before these drugs were available, a man in your condition would likely spend most of his life in the back wards of a hospital. Just driftwood. Not only would you never work again, in the mines or anywhere else, but you wouldn't even be allowed to live in this society. Wouldn't he be surprised to see me? Well, I don't want to read that story. That, too, is a long story. Okay, well, I should read a poem or two out of my old book. I was thinking about the peace symbol up on the top of the hill. I was looking up at the peace symbol. Everybody takes it for granted. It's been up there a long time. Nobody knows how it got there. It's not like Our Lady of the Rockies. Everybody knows that hill. But I remember one time I was concerned about my daughters, and I was teaching at the University of Montana. It was a long time ago, and I had been involved with all kinds of activist activity, and a guy had sneaked through my window in my house in the middle of the night to tell me how bad he felt about Bobby Kennedy being shot, and I felt pretty bad too. And then Easter came, and I was trying to figure out some way of taking care of my 2 kids. And some girl at the university, I wish I remembered her name, she gave me a hat. It was a gray felt hat. I often thought that if I could just finally get this poem finished and I could remember her name, I'd call the next book of poems that comes out A Green Box Kite. But I've dedicated it to my girls, and one of them's 30 now, And she flies around the country a lot in an airplane. She flies too much, and I worry about her, but she just had a baby 3 weeks ago, and so I'm a grandfather. So that grounded her for a while. And the other one's working to become a nurse, and she's only got a couple of quarters to go before she gets an RN degree. So I dedicated this poem many years ago to those two little girls who were living here in Missoula. And I told them I had promises, you know, to keep. And this is the last poem I'll read, and I'm sure it will surprise Betty because she will remember the lead poem in this book and so on. But this is the poem I'd like to close with before we listen to Vic. A green box kite. Again wet wind whips the river. Ice boils down the mountain pass. The earth crumbles in the thaw. A kite sails into clouds, spilling from my eye. We have promises to keep, an Easter egg hunt in the park, laughter deep within, songs to sing, minds to bend, children rolling on the lawn. Before the swell of summer heat, before the mowers come, a great bat will rise into the sky with phosphorescent eyes, and I will wear my gray felt hat and watch that great black bat fly away winter on icy wings, far back into the mind, to circle the word, a green box kite made of balsa wood with a great peace symbol on its side. Light enough to catch the eye, fleet enough to meet the wind, awkward enough to stand the storm, big as any ark ever built, hooked to a lover's string. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. I'd like to make a couple of announcements before introducing Vic Charlo. I'd like to announce that Kotodama, in association with the Environmental Media Center and the International Wildlife Film Festival, is seeking storytellers, poets, and performance and visual artists to present their work at a public performance on the evening of April 3rd. They want to provide a wide diversity of artists focusing on the theme of wildness, not wilderness, wildness in nature and in spirit. New and undiscovered artists are encouraged. The individual performances will be limited to 15 minutes, and works of art will be on display for the evening. Materials must be submitted by March 15th for selection. You can contact Greg Gordon or Rich Doyle. Another announcement is Kinesis, a literary arts magazine that's starting up here in Montana. Austin and Randy have come and talked to me about this. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. They're looking for submissions for their pilot issue. You can get a hold of them at 862-0819 or send your submissions to Post Office Box 4007, Whitefish, Montana. Okay? Our next reader this evening is going to be Vic Charlo, and I can't take responsibility for writing his introduction. He wrote it himself, and it's very, very simple and tells a lot. Victor A. Charlo is a Bitterroot Salish parent, poet, philosopher, theologian, and teacher. He works as a counselor with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes at the Kicking Horse Job Corps in Montana. I'd like you to welcome Vic Charlo.
Thank you. Nice crowd. That always feels good. It's really good to see Ed tonight. I'm really into nostalgia, right? Brings back old times. See, Missoula is my home. Although I live on the Flathead Reservation, which is about 16 miles north of here, Missoula has always been a part of me. The university, I went to high school down the block here when Loyola was here. I was the second graduating class after they reopened the school. So I'm really tied into Missoula the way Ed is tied into Butte, and I think the way people who come to Missoula and learn to love it and stay here. And you know the old saying, you come to Missoula and you always come back. And I just like the thought of that. You do. And my poetry, I see it that way too, you know, coming back. And that's why it's been really good this evening to listen to Ed and to think about those times. And I'd like to dedicate this reading to those times of Ed, of Dick, of Dave and Onik, the Johnsons, Rocky. We used to have some fun. Dave Stafford, he was there. And that really makes me feel good. God, let me read some poetry. This is from the book. Boy, that feels good. It's been a long time coming, Ed, I'll tell you. This one I dedicate for the students of the Two Eagle River School, and I call it Flathead River Creation. You say, old days fold into one another, and new days seem the same. Yet each moment shifts with sun. Nothing will be the same as this. When wind breathes the flathead alive, you are the center this instant for all. You are the creation of the universe one more time. Wrote some good poetry when I was teaching at the Two Eagle River School because we wrote together, and with the help of the things that Ed was talking about, going to Dick's classes and associating together, I hope that we learned some things, maybe got a little wiser, I hope, got a little more tender. And my hope is, of course, is to pass this on to young Indian students, which I hope I'm doing. And I was talking about dedications. I'd like to dedicate this reading also to my boy, Martin, who's with us tonight, and another friend of mine, Martin, and my friend Betsy that I haven't seen for a long time. I'd like to dedicate this reading to them also. This one is called Dixon Direction. That's where I live now. That's where the old school used to be. Directions are simple here. Geese know where to go and eagles fly. Yet sometimes you get lost on wrong roads. Then when you come to school, you seek from this high window and find living river, red willow, white aspen, old juniper and pine. This is you, and bright clay cliffs fix the stars. This one is a place. You know, I write about places a lot. And this is where we have the sweat house. And as far as I know, it's probably been there from the time that they moved the Bitterroot Salish from the Bitterroot into the Jocko. And there's this creek there at the top of Evero Pass, and it's called Frog Creek. And I lived there for a really long time before I realized what the name of that creek was, even. You know, that was the creek. And I found, oh, Frog Creek, okay. So, we have a sweat house there, and we still use it. And one time I went there and found this poem, and I call it Frog Creek Circle. And it's for my family, especially Jan. Mountains so close, we are relative. Creek so cold, it brings winter rain. We return to warm August home, Frog Creek, where I've lived so long that smells are stored, opened only here. This land never changes, always whole, always the way we want it to be, yet we always come back to check our senses or to remember dreams. We are remembered today in circles of family, of red pine, of old-time chiefs, of forgotten horses that thunder dark stars. These songs that we come to this day, soft as Indian mint, as strange as this sky. Those of you that are buying this edition, there's a misprint here. That last line, as strange, they repeat, as strange as this day, that's as strange as this sky. Damn, that's what happens when you just don't proofread, right? They sent me the galley. They sent me, you know. Oh yeah, that looks good, you know. You don't even read it, right? Oh yeah, that looks good, you know. Hey, wait a minute here, that's not right. And I'm reading it. I'm reading the poem, right? And I realize, hey, that's not the right word. And I, oh God, I knew I should have. Well, by the time they sent me the galley, I was really tired of all of this. I'd given up, to tell you the truth. I just thought, it'll never happen, you know. I mean, this is just all, they're just doing this, right? They just, you know, I'm going to send them back the galley, and, it'll be another 2 years, you know. Like I say, really happy. I want to read a poem now that I think should have been in the book, but isn't that the way it is? You know, the things that you think are going to make it aren't the ones that make it, and you think, whoa, they like that one, huh? And, oh, yeah, that's a good one, too. I mean, yeah, that is a good one. Yeah, glad you picked that one. Oh, boy, why did they pick that one? Frog Creek Circle. You know, Frog Creek Circle. Of the ones that they'd have picked, that's not the ones I'd have picked. I like it. I really like it. I like it a lot more now that it's in the book. Oh yeah, good poem, good poem. Okay, this one, this is my favorite, tell you the truth, and it's for my boy. And it's called Generations of Need, and it's for my son, Martin Antoine Victor Paul Charlo. And I wrote it for him like when he was, you know, that tiny. And now look at him, 14-year-old football player. We're going to go to Notre Dame. That's where we're going to go. Help out the Irish. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. They're doing okay now, but you never know when you need some more help, and Martin's going to be it. Well, anyway, I won't get into all that. Okay, generations of need. Generations find focus in my little boy's face when thoughts of old times and old folks creep into that need to delve deep into who we are. He is the little chief without saying. I read worry of Moise, who states that we have too much schooling and now we think more than we should. He says the people used to send a young boy to the top of Red Mountain for the good of all of our people, and we were well. I follow De Smet's stream as I try to freeze a focus on unfamiliar feelings, except that we do belong to mountains, and my boy is the face of all of our grandfathers who hold both of us true to cottonwood and stone. Yeah, I like that one. Oh. I've also been thinking of war. And I guess I've thought of war most of my life because I grew up in the time of World War II, and I saw what it did to our family and what it was like to be patriotic and what it was like to lose a brother in the war and hear that he was a hero, but there was no one to congratulate. And so I wrote this poem, and it was something that was on my mind. See, I would have been 5 years old, 6 years old at Pearl Harbor. So I do remember. And I feel that I'm a veteran of that war. We had air raids in Polson, Montana, if you can believe it. We did. Because they were afraid that they were going to bomb the dam. And so the siren would go off and we'd turn all our lights off and until they gave you the all clear sign. And my brother really wanted to go in the Marines and fight for his country, and he did. And this was a little part of my remembrance of that time. And I call it, on turning the calendar on the night of the 31st of July, and it's for Private First Class Louis C. Charlo, United States Marine Corps Reserve. August 1945, we, America, dropped a bomb 34 years ago, 6 months too late for my brother, who died in March on Iwo Jima fighting Japs. I don't feel good about any of this as I sit in retrospect this warm near August night and think of my brother Charles with love, and remember Fred Levasseur, an old retired French lumberjack who helped cut all the trees down in Evro, telling us about the atom bomb, as he called it, and told us that the bomb was only as big as a pea, yet we knew in our young minds the brutal force in Fred's little one-room log cabin. 1944. It was August, horse haying time. We played in hot sun and old red sawdust when Chuck whistled his whistle, and there he was in marine green on Sweathouse Trail by the creek. Mom screaming her delight, then all drinking the night. Happy that instant. February came with wailing on dark road, and I conclude this night that Fred's bum ignited light years too soon for us all. You know, when Ed was talking about the time, 64, that was a significant time for me because in 63, I'd just come out of the seminary. I'd been studying to be a priest for 6 years, from 57 to 63. And God, I got out to the University of Montana, and it was so strange, just like walking into walls, like, whoa, there are women in the world, Yes, and it's okay to look at them, it was, yeah, and of course it was all that internal stuff that you got in the seminary. Whatever that means, yeah, for whatever, yeah. And that's a strange 6 years for me that I've never really have written about, except for this one poem that I'd like to read to you, and it's about the first day. It's about the first day, and that's all I've been able to think about and write about. Now that I'm getting some distance, of course, now it's been, now that's significant because it's like almost 25 years or and I, and when I start letting my beard grow again, this, like in January, like I saw all this white, like, whoa, that's why I let it go. That's why I let it grow. Ordinarily what I do is it'll grow out a little bit, and then my girls will start saying, well, my boy too will start, are you going to grow a beard? Because there was a time when I had this beard that was like down to here, like I had this real long beard, and I shaved it off one time and never grew it back. And so they always used to ask me that, and I thought, well, I don't know. And then I saw this white, and I thought, I really like that. The Indians say, that once you're starting to gray, maybe, you're getting a little wisdom, and that's my hope. God, I've been just bumping into buildings for too long. I still do, it wasn't just coming out of the seminary that it caused that. Let me read this to you. If you want to know what the Latin means, come up and I'll whisper it in your ear after the reading. The translation. Okay, it's called St. Francis Xavier Novitiate, Sheridan, Oregon, 1957. Boy, that year just gets farther and farther away every time I read this poem.
2 years before I was born.
Whoa, yeah, isn't that something? Oh, and that really makes me feel good. See, Indians are, like they figure in the Indian life expectancy, the male is about 42. We've creeped up to about 45. I'm beating the odds. And I'm feeling good about it. Well, see, I must have to be here for some reason. I hope, this poetry is worth something. I sure work at it. All right, let me read this. This was the first day of the seminary. Okay, this would happen. You come 60 miles by taxi from Portland on this fair September day. The driver tells you that if you need any women, just call him. And he will appear during the long retreat with the goods in some miraculous machine. Deus ex machina, mirabile dictu, mirabile visu. I realize now, if you sing Gregorian chant, you forget the stick game songs. And that was a significant detail of my stay in the seminary. When I got back out of the seminary, I didn't know any of the old songs. Just like that. In 6 years, I'd forgotten the songs, but I knew some dandy Gregorian. Ooh, I guess I was brainwashed, huh? I'm losing track of time. I'm going to read some new, brand new ones. They're so new I don't even have them typed. I went to Churchill to see the polar bears last fall, and I was really just knocked out by the whole experience. It's really strange, right? That we would go to see those bears. I mean, and see, there's that real dichotomy, right? That I shouldn't do that, but I did do that. And I'm really torn by that whole experience because, those bears were there first, and, they didn't need me looking at them, but I sure wanted to. And I wrote some things that I'd like to share with you. Maybe I'll read 2 of these and read the last one out of the book and call it a night. All right. That's what I'm going to do. This one, how many have played fox and geese when they were children? All right, good. Well, when we were going up to Churchill, the people that I was with, like I said, we were, there's this hour layover that you have at Thompson on your way up. And so Chuck Jonkel took us through the woods and showed us some things, and we still had time. And so I said, let's play fox and geese. And everybody said, yeah, let's play fox and geese. And they said, what's fox and geese? Well, as it turned out, this young lady from Fairbanks that I dedicated this poem to knew fox and geese, and so we were the ones who got to circle together, and here's this poem about what happened. Well, yeah. And I call it Fox and Geese at Thompson, and it's for Denali Henderson. Elaine almost fell on Denali as we follow moonlight, night trail along railroad track. Denali and I connect on childhood game played in Fairbanks and Frenchtown snows. No one else knows. She says when she was little, they would shovel snow until it was tunnel deep, until they were too tired to play. One year, our ring was ice hard and so slick that Ray Steele bloodied dirty snow with his head. Now we follow Denali as she tracks out the ring. Then she takes trails already made to cut ring by 4. Denali says they would make child paths any way they felt was right. Northern lights flash pale red as we run with childhood wind away from quick fox, laughing from a place that we haven't touched or connected with for long, swift, forgetful years. Joe, Elaine, Mac, Denali, and I give full life to this moment in moon that pulls our joy to this delicate flood tide, as delicate as this land, and Denali, our sacred circle, is frozen forever. I'm going to read this one and see if we've got time for another Churchill, and then we'll finish up. Again, another dichotomy in Churchill land. They have these things that they call tundra buggies that you can take out and you can go, and the bears will come up. And see, what they do is they put sandwiches out there, and they come or they can smell the food. See, I mean, see, they can smell food for like 25 miles. See, so if you're sitting there and you're eating your sandwiches, then there's the bears, even though your windows are closed. Well, these tundra buggies go out there. See, well, I wasn't going to go on a tundra buggy, but then the night before we were to leave, they had this. There were these French filmmakers that were doing a child film on the bears, and they had a seat open, and so we drew straws. Actually, they were toothpicks, and I got the short toothpick, and I got to say whether or not if I wanted to ride the helicopter. I said yeah. I said yeah. What could I say? Okay, I hope this poem kind of reflects on that and how I really felt about it. But let's see. It's called Churchill, Last Day, First Chopper Ride, and it's for one of the teachers that took us up there that teaches at the Salish Kootenai College, Frank Tyro. He's the guy that had us draw toothpicks. We draw toothpicks to see who gets to fly after Frank moves us with words from love of polar country of one spirit in people who were never strangers, just one, and we fly. I try to be open to winning or losing the chance, yet a part of me, the child, wants this new experience, and as I draw, I see in Frank's look that I have luck. I want us all to be lifted across tundra sky. Now I rock away from Churchill on late train, thinking how the chopper sounded in clear air, and how our voices sounded over radio, the child remembering movie bomb run over World War II terrain and dramatic sounding tone. Yet we don't bomb bears, but we scare them into water, and I feel odd about our mission as French movie makers make war with tender light. I didn't have to accept this smooth run or help with Frenchman weaponry, but the beauty of Ouse Blanc, swimming, diving into Hudson Bay, drives me to talk to Belly Gunner about friendlies at 12 o'clock low, but my French allows only a song about dancing on a bridge in Davignon. You remember this? You remember the song, huh? Yeah. I was going to put some of the song in there. I was singing that a lot, you know, because I couldn't. You see, I took French, see, when I was in the seminary, and that was the only French that would come out. I really wanted to talk to these guys too, and Davignon, yeah, and I thought I should have over the intercom, you know, I should have sang that song, you know, while we were going, you know, we were going over those bears. A real bizarre thing, a real bizarre experience, and see, I'm a real student of the bizarre. That's why I read newspapers. Bizarre. Bizarre. I mean, you know, like, bizarre stuff in the newspaper. I love it. I mean, you read the headlines, but that's not the part I want to read. I want to read the bizarre stuff. Of course, the headlines are pretty bizarre, but it's those little things. You know, it's the stories about this and that and another thing. You know, hard copy. You know, we got 23 now. ABC. That's bizarre. Watch it sometime if you're into the bizarre. Okay, bizarreness number 2, called Churchill Bear Jail. Won't say anything above. I'll just read the poem. One of your first major stops in Churchill is jail, Bear Jail. What makes you feel sad and odd at the same time? Then this feeling turns into knowing that Bear Jail is silly, yet incredibly bizarre. Bizarre seems the right word to describe Quonset hut outside of town, but there is more. Bears, you're told, are given jail time depending on their offense and how many times they commit that offense or any other faux pas. First offenders are handed back, are hauled back to Churchill Cape with other free bears, but if they come back to raid or to be caught again, they are given 30 days. They are not fed while they're serving their time. 30 days in jail without a lawyer, without a judge, without a jury, without bail, without good time served. You realize? Then you think of bizarre ways of breaking them out. No justice. Yet you think, what would happen if there is a judge? 30 days, he says. Bear, representing himself, asks about his bear rights. Judge says he shouldn't waive any rights because bears have none anyway. The bear waves goodbye with perfect law decorum to be put in his cell till hell freezes over. But what's the bear's offense? That he can smell food for 20 miles? That a town is built on ancient rendezvous ground that was his so long that genes are imprinted with a map where every stone is turned? That he could be trapped because there is ring seal meat in bear trap and he's hungry before the hunt? Is this justice? You can't help but think of all native people in the same fix. You hear odd story about a 3, 4-time, many-time loser bear who would stretch his neck and close his eyes, waiting for the dart. What do bears dream of when they are all tranked up? Dreaming of ancient ice to cover Hudson Bay? Can they be let out when ice comes before their 30, 60 days are up? What about the incorrigibles? What about all of us who know jail for bears is truly bizarre? Do we know that spirit is on trial, or that what we feel for bears doesn't come from guile, or that their need to be free rings true with our love, our care? All right, one more, sleepy kids, and we'll get you home. I'm getting sleepy myself. Oh, this is always fun. Okay, the last one that I saved is, again, the old nostalgia trip, right? Go back to the places that you love, see what's going on there. Well, one time, I had a friend, and I was telling her about Dick Hugo, and we were going to stop at Garnett to check out Garnett because I'd never been there. And of course, Dick had written a poem about there and about some other places along the Blackfoot River. But we did make the mill town. And so, you know, that's a good place to make if you're thinking about Dick and all of those times back in the 60s. And so I took this friend of mine, her name is Anne Marie Yaley, and by golly, if I just didn't get a letter from her this very day, she'd been in Australia, New Zealand, just got back to San Fran and wrote me a letter, and that I'd be reading her poem tonight. And I've been wondering about her, you know, since this poem got published, you know, what she was doing. Now I know. Okay. The Milltown, for Anne Marie Yaley. We miss Garnett soon after we get on Golden Road. As we talk how we see the world, our job today to honor Hugo's memory by stopping at places he saw and wrote about. Garnett ghosts are tricky. Milltown Union Bar, laundromat, and cafe felt strange until we went in. There was something wrong yet right about that bar, still called Harold's Club. Harold tried to get fancy and change the name on us. Dick wrote a poem about the old name, place that I truly know, and I open in at Milltown. So, Anne Marie, I bring you here to see these heads and that bad painting, the crossed swords gone or hidden. The rest is here. We order draft beer like Dick and I would do. I read his poem to you. That moment would have been fine if it ended there, but it didn't. No, the guy with a snootful sitting next to me asks, "What you got there?" pointing to Hugo's book. I happily show him the poem, and he reads. He laughs and asks where he can get a copy of the book. I tell him this particular one is probably out of print. I can't close the door. He tells me to show the poem to the bartender. She reads long and smiles. She asks if she can get a copy. She asks if she can copy the poem. I'm glad. She buys us 2 scoops, as we used to call them. She says mugs. I think of Dick's line as she writes on the yellow pad, "You need never leave. Money or a story brings you booze," or a memory, I think. The spelling queen bee tells us the word laundromat is spelled wrong. Bartender, you and I act as if it's still there, not gone. Everything else was there that day in disarray. They saved the heads, even if Harold tried to make his bar that elegant club where people from Missoula would fly by freeway. We came, Dick, Onik, Dave, me, students, and what about that time we shot part of the first movie on that Saturday night? And Anne Marie, these memories all have meaning, not just for me, but for you now. Not just because you are my friend, but because the word burns with first fire. We are these stories now, as sure as Dick and I would sing you now, then to magic time, to those first safe places we find growing up. And now we burn yes, we sing yes, to world we find in us. Thank you. Thank you. Really a good audience. Appreciate it.